Hello everyone, today we are diving into one of the most explosive, least understood political choices in all of ancient Chinese history. The Qin dynasty's total ban on infeting imperial princes, a radical break from 800 years of Zhou dynasty. Tradition that redefined power governance and the very survival of empires. This is not a minor administrative tweak, it is a death sentence for feudal warlordism, a legal cage built for the imperial family itself, and the single most important structural choice that allowed Qin to unify China and create the blueprint for every dynasty that followed. Let us start with the raw, unvarnished truth. Under Qin Shi Huang, no son of the emperor received a royal title, no piece of land was granted as a hereditary fief, and no imperial prince held the power to tax, judge, raise troops, or govern a single territory. This was not a random decision. It was a calculated law, enforced policy, rooted in bloodshed, political trauma, and the coldest calculation of state survival. To grasp its weight, we must go back to the system. Qin destroyed the Zhou Fengjian, or feudal system. For 8 centuries, Zhou kings had enfeoffed their sons, brothers, and loyal nobles with vast territories, granting them full autonomy to rule as mini-monarchs. At first, blood ties kept the peace, but within generations those ties frayed. Princes turned into warlords, fiefs became kingdoms, and China descended into the spring and autumn, and warring states, periods 5 centuries of non-stop slaughter, where hundreds of states fought to the death, and the Zhou king became a powerless figurehead. Qin's rulers watched this carnage for centuries, and they swore never to repeat it. The groundwork for Qin's no-fief policy was laid long before unification, during Shang Yang's brutal transformative reforms in the 4th century BCE. Shang Yang, the architect of Qin's rise, targeted the hereditary aristocracy and royal clan alike. He abolished inherited fiefs, tied status to military merit, and split large clans into small nuclear families to weaken their power. Crucially, he wrote into Qin law the first restrictions on imperial princes. They could not hold local office, could not own large fiefs, and could not wield independent military or administrative power. This was not just reform, it was a direct attack on the old feudal order that had torn China apart. By the time Yingzheng conquered the last of the 6 kingdoms in 221 BCE and declared himself Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, this anti-fief principle was already baked into Qin's legal DNA. But the moment of truth came in a legendary imperial court debate that would decide China's future. Prime Minister Huang stepped forward, first speaking for nearly all the court ministers. He argued that the new empire's distant territories, Yan, Qi, and Shu, were too far to control from Xiangyang. The only way to secure them, he insisted, was to enfief off the emperor's sons as regional kings, just as the Zhou had done. Every minister agreed it was the only system they knew, the only way they could imagine governing such a vast land. But then, Ting Wei Li Si, the sharpest legal mind in Qin, rose to destroy the argument. Li Si's words, recorded for eternity in Sima Qian's records of the Grand Historian, are a masterclass in realpolitik. He reminded the court that the Zhou had enfeoffed countless royal kin, but over time, their blood relations faded, and they attacked each other like mortal enemies. The Zhou king could not stop them. No amount of ritual or kinship could control armed autonomous lords. Now that the empire was unified under one ruler, Li Si declared, all land must be divided into commanderies and counties, Junqian, governed by appointed, non-hereditary officials, answerable only to the emperor. Imperial princes and meritorious ministers should be rewarded generously with state taxes, but given no land to rule and no power to rebel. This, Li Si concluded, was the only way to guarantee eternal peace. Qin Shi Huang's response was final and unflinching. The world suffered endless war precisely because of feudal lords. Now that the empire is newly stabilized, to establish kingdoms again is to plant the seeds of war. Seeking peace this way is impossible. The Ting Wei is right with that sentence. Feudalism for imperial princes was dead in China, buried by the man who had ended the warring states. This was not just a political choice. It was encoded into Qin's iron laws, most notably, the Zhili LV law on official appointment, excavated from the Shuihudi Qin bamboo slips. The law explicitly stated, all imperial princes shall not be appointed, commandery governors, or county magistrates, shall not hold fiefs exceeding 1,000 households, and any violation shall be punished as territorial secession, a capital offense. The crime of lies, e2, splitting the empire's land for royal kin, was punishable by death, no exceptions. Let us make this crystal clear. Qin's sons were not pampered princes with private kingdoms. Crown Prince Fusu served as a military supervisor in Shangjun, a low-ranking post with no territorial control. Hu Hai, the youngest son, held a minor clerical role in the imperial household. Other princes were given small stipends from the state treasury, but were barred from holding any office that gave them land troops or tax revenue. They were not rulers, they were privileged civilians, kept under tight central control to eliminate any threat of rebellion. The Qing court even issued edicts ordering princes to leave Xianyang once they reached adulthood, exiling them to distant regions without any governing authority, purely to prevent them from forming factions in the capital. This system solved the single greatest flaw of the Zhou dynasty, the fragmentation of power. For the first time in Chinese history, a central government held absolute, unchallenged authority over every inch of territory. Local officials were appointed, promoted, and dismissed by the emperor. They could not pass their positions to their sons. They owed their loyalty only to the state. The imperial clan, the group most likely to seize power and split the empire, was neutralized by law. This was not cruelty, it was statecraft, forged in the fires of 5 centuries of war. Critics then, and now, have argued that this policy left Qin isolated, without royal allies, to defend it during the uprisings that ended the dynasty. But that is a historical misunderstanding. Qin's collapse was caused by tyrannical laws, excessive corvée labor, and brutal suppression, not by the lack of royal fiefs. The no-fief policy itself did not fail. It was the regime's cruelty that doomed it. In fact, the policy's legacy is the entire structure of imperial China. Every subsequent dynasty, from the Han to the Qing, adopted Qin's core principle. Imperial princes might receive titles and wealth, but they would not be granted autonomous fiefs with real governing power. The Han briefly revived feudal kingdoms, only to face the rebellion of the 7 states, after which Emperor Wu stripped royal lords of all real authority. For 2,000 years, China's imperial system remained centralized, precisely because Qin had eliminated the danger of royal warlords. What makes this story so gripping is that it is a rare example of a ruling class choosing to destroy its own privilege for the survival of the state. Most dynasties pamper their royal families, grant them land and power, and watch as those families tear the realm apart. Qin Shi Huang and Li Si looked at 800 years of failure, ignored the pleas of their court, and wrote a law that chained their own sons to the will of the central state. They did not do it out of kindness. They did it out of a cold, unyielding understanding of power. The Qin royal clan system, no titles, no fiefs, no independent power, was not just a Qin policy. It was the foundation of Chinese imperial governance, a lesson etched in blood and ink that shaped the world's most enduring imperial system. It proves that great empires are not built by rewarding kin. They are built by controlling power, even when that power belongs to your own flesh and blood. This is the hidden backbone of Qin's unification, the secret that allowed one man to rule a continent-sized empire, and the choice that still echoes in China's political DNA today. If you enjoyed this journey into ancient China, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more epic history. See you next time.